So Canon just announced the R5 Mark II alongside the Canon R1. Both cameras are jam-packed, especially the R5 Mark II. So what this camera can't do and what it probably can't do, you're gonna find out in this video. Coming up. Hi guys, my name is Paul, I'm a German-based cinematographer and this channel is all about filmmaking gear reviews but also DaVinci Resolve tutorials, so if that's something that you're interested in, consider subscribe, that really helps the channel. So thank you really for that. So first of all, a little disclaimer, I was invited by Canon Germany to test the R5 Mark II and also the R1 for a full day of shooting, so we had different style of scenarios and I have a pretty good understanding of what the camera can do. And since the R5 Mark II is way more video focused than the R1, I will focus on the R5 Mark II in this video. So the R5 Mark II has a new developed 8K 45 megapixel backside illuminated stacked sensor. So that was horrible to say, but anyway, it allows the camera for a faster readout speed and therefore for less rolling shutter, which is basically great. Also, the camera can do now 8K RAW internally and up to 60 frames per second, which is crazy. We still have the 4K 120, which is compressed in a compressed codec. But speaking of codecs, we now have the Cinema EOS codecs in this camera. So we now have XFAVC in 10-bit 422 and other flavors alongside RAW, which is great because I really hated the H.265 files in the R5 Mark I and also R6. These ones were just a pain to edit, but now finally we have now XFAVC. And also finally we have Canon Log 2 in camera, which was something that I was begging Canon for years. Now we finally have it, also BT709, and now you can basically also record 10-bit in a normal picture standard profile, which previously you can't only do when you were in log. So this is great. Also, Canon additionally gave the camera some new video features such as waveform and also false color, which is highly appreciated. The camera also now has back a full-size HDMI. With the full-size HDMI we can also record RAW externally if you want to do that. The camera also now has a pre-record function of 5 seconds, which is great. It also has a tele lamp, which is cool, and we now have probably the best IBIS that I've seen. So Canon claims that are 8.5 stops. So from what I can tell, the IBIS looks better than what Panasonic offers, which is crazy because Panasonic was way up here and that's something that I have to test even further. But from what I've seen, the IBIS wobble is gone and it looks exceptionally well. Also, the autofocus is really great. It is really sticky. Also, especially for photographers, you now have also eye control, which was previously introduced with the R3. You can control basically your autofocus with your eye, and it also in sports it has a new tracking feature. So the autofocus now is able to tell which player has the ball and will automatically put the player in focus which has the ball, which is a pretty cool feature, I think. But as I've said, these features are only available in photography for just now, but also from what I've seen, the autofocus in the R5 Mark II works really great. Now let's take a look at low light. So I tested the camera in low light and it seems to be that at ISO 3200 the camera is noisier than ISO 6400, so maybe there's a hidden second native ISO, even though Canon claims they don't have a second native ISO. I don't know, but personally I would rather use ISO 6400, which will also be the maximum that I would use the camera, than ISO 3200. Everything also ISO 1600, 800 looks great, so you can definitely use that. Also, the image quality from the R5 Mark II, the image quality just looks amazing. Colors straight out of camera look amazing. Also, the camera, how it handles highlights and everything, it looks really promising. I'm also really interested to see how good the dynamic range of this camera is, because the R5 Mark I wasn't too great when it comes to dynamic range, so that's something that I'm really interested in. There's a really big bummer in this camera because the camera has 8K 60, but 4K 60 isn't downsampled, it's line skipped. So there's no super sampled 4K 60, unfortunately. There is 4K 60 as I've said, but it's line skipped. I just tested that and from my taste, it looks good. Also, the oversampled 4K looks good, up to 30 frames per second as well. Also, the 4K 120 is a little bit noisier than the rest, but I think it looks really decent. Also, it's line skipped. Also, they have now an S-RAW feature, which is basically you can record in 4K in RAW. But as Canon told us, there's also something like line skipped. So I also quickly tested that, but I also couldn't see a big difference. So that's all these features are things that I have to test further to get really, yeah, some results that I can count on basically. There are also a few things that I wish that Canon really has to address before this camera comes out. So for example, these are just software features, but basically if you have your LUT turned on when you're having Canon Log 2 or something else, you cannot toggle on false color, which is a shame. Unfortunately also you cannot map the waveform to a function button. So you can turn it on, but you can scale it and you cannot reframe the position. But also I wish that all these things, the LUT, the false color and the waveform, can be changed to a function button so I can toggle them on and off when I'm in shooting, so really quickly. For the moment just false color is able to be toggled to a function button, but the other things you still have to go deep into the menu to turn them on and off, and everything would be so much easier if you have that on a function button. That would be amazing, Canon, so please do that. Unfortunately the camera also doesn't feature open gate, which is something that I would have wished for, especially nowadays reframing for social media and stuff like that. That would be really helpful. So if that's something that would be possible in the future, that would be a great feature, I think. Also, there's the big question about overheating. Now Canon has done a few tests and I will put them on the screen here, what Canon has tested, and you can also buy separately a battery grip where there's a fan inside. Now the body itself has a heat dissipating structure, so also that helps, and in general you can record much longer than you could with the R5 One. And from my testing, the camera wasn't overheating when I was testing it the whole day, but that's something that we really have to test in here. So the camera will be available somewhat in August, and it will cost you around $4,500 depending on where you get it, obviously. So I'm pretty excited about this camera. Canon also told me that the R5C still has its own place. You see now the line is even blurrier between the cameras, but still the R5C has its positioning inside there because it has timecode and all the other features. So personally I really like what Canon did, but we can already see that there are some limitations to this camera, and I would have wished that the camera doesn't have any limitations, unfortunately, but that is something that we really have to test in the near future. So if there are any questions that you have, and if you have any comments to this camera, just put them down below and I'm happy to have a really good conversation with you. And if you want to have specific tests that I should do when I have the camera here in my hands, then just also tell me in the comments below. And yeah, I hope to see you in my very next video. Cheers!